order at 12:03. And Glenn, Dr. Pavlicek, if you'd like to give us a little background before we discuss and vote, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. As I said, I think last time I was here, we have a regular education contract with First Student, and we also have special education arrangements. They're not bid contracts because they're not under 30B, with about 9 different providers for special ed transportation, for special ed, homeless, foster children transportation. After the acts of Chapter 92 of the Acts of 2020 were passed, which allowed some payments to some of these companies, even despite the fact that services weren't rendered, but in order to facilitate them staying in business over time and so forth, some of the companies asked for payments. And some of them had enough support from the Payroll Protection Act and so forth that they didn't require anything from us. So 8 of the companies have not requested anything. 3 special ed carriers and a regular ed transportation contract did, because they were all individually too large for the Payroll Protection Act and some of the other issues. So we negotiated with First Student. First Student initially had asked for 83% of the contract cost, which they felt was sufficient to carry them during the time of closure, which we thought seemed a little high. So the figure you have in front of you is our offer to them of 30%, which they accepted. So we worked with other communities in the South Shore that have First Student, and basically 10 or 12 of us agreed to this number at 30% of the contract cost. So that's the $75,000. The other 2, VHS and Vanpool, were small numbers. They do limited work with us, and they had suggested, again, smaller arrangements. And so we were fine with the 6,000 and the 7,000 and change for the 2 of those. So we have received the affidavits that are required under the law from VHS and Vanpool. The affidavit for First Student is actually attached to their contract amendment that I spent the morning on and off with Kevin on the phone, and drafts of that. So as soon as we get that signed, that'll be said as well. That's being included as an appendix to that, and I will forward them on to you. But basically what we're asking for now is authorization for the payment of these 3 amounts to these 3 bus companies. As I said, we have one other vendor, YCN, which we have made an offer to, but which they have not accepted. So I'm not asking for anything at this point. Or at least I'll take that up separately, but I think for the most part, let's talk about these 3. And we're asking for, the school committee has approved these expenditures. And so it just requires a vote of the select board as well.
Thank you. And Mr. Freitag, is there anything that you would like to add?
Sure. Good morning, Madam Chair. No, Dr. Pavlicek summed it up quite nicely.
Thank you. So I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve the following payments with transportation companies in the following amounts pursuant to Section 12 of Chapter 92 of the Acts of 2020. VHS Transportation, $6,259.15. Vanpool, $7,782.45. And First Student, Inc., $75,223.97.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Yes, Mr. Zulus.
I have 4 questions. One is, Glenn, what's the percentage for VHS and Vanpool?
VHS is 45%.
Yeah.
Vanpool is actually 78 because they're a very small company and they could, yeah.
And are those
small amount of money? We weren't going to argue too much with them.
And are those the same amounts? Did you do the same thing with the 10 to 12 communities on those 2 as well?
No.
Those are separate.
These are separate because First Student's a little different because it's a bid contract, and so you're really negotiating an amendment or a release to the contract. whereas these, it's just individual negotiations.
Right. And that actually leads to question two, which is, are we going to get a release of claims for each of these? Maybe that may be a Kevin question.
Yeah, maybe a Kevin. What they're doing is they're submitting us, a bill for this amount, which we're paying, as opposed to the larger amount. But I'll let Kevin go.
Thank you, Mike. On the first student amendment, you'll see that, and in fact, I would suggest that just in regard to the motion that was just made, one of you may want to make just a friendly amendment that the payments are subject to, specifically first student, subject to receipt of the amendment in the affidavit that's required under the special acts of 2020 by, I would suggest, the town accountant, because all of these payments are conditioned upon that affidavit being reviewed by the approving authorities to make sure that there's essentially no double dipping. Having said that, the First Amendment contract reads like a release, Mike. And it basically says that performance by both parties is complete once payment of the negotiated amount has been made. And I confirmed with Dr. Pavlicek this morning that there is no anticipated request for any services under that contract, which otherwise would have run through September 5th of this year. But under the circumstances, is essentially over, and that no future performance of any kind will be made by or required by any party under that contract.
Okay.
And then what about the other two? Are we going to do we need to get a release of claims from the other two, or release
There's
of contract? Or?
There's nothing in the statute that requires it, and I haven't seen anything from those two vendors. I don't know if Dr. Pavlicek has, but I have not.
So, for instance, I'm submitting these through to Amy. I have the Vanpool one in front of me. And so, for instance, for each month, they give you a monthly bill, and they put on it, we had 46 out of district students, 12 days transportation. The cost per route is this. And then at the bottom of it, it says COVID-19 discount 22%, and there's 78 for them. So they're showing an invoice with a reduced rate.
Okay. We just want to make sure that they don't come back
Right.
and it's all over next year and say, oh, by the way, we gave you that discount, but now it's all over, so we want our full payment on the contract or the invoice. So.
Well, since special ed, you're always negotiating with them. You always have the feeling that when you negotiate with them next fall for transportation, they might just build that in.
Yeah. That's right. So yeah, as long as Kevin's comfortable with that we won't get hit for it. Then and then the third question is, what does the sworn statement say? I mean, that's related. What is that basically, the sworn statement? And again, that might be a Kevin question.
I can respond to that, Dr. Pavlicek. Under the special acts of under the special acts of 2020, Chapter 92, Section 12, there's a set of provisions that allows for these payments, and it says that before any payment, the service contractor shall present to the approving authorities, which are, among others, you, the select board, a sworn statement reporting grants, discounted loans, or other financial support that the service contractor has received in terms of state, federal, or local aid. And again, this is the idea of preventing any sort of double dipping. So it's my understanding that the two special ed companies have already submitted those affidavits. If they haven't already, they could be forwarded to you now, so you should be able to take a look at them. Basically, they set forth the amounts that they've received, if any, and then the important number there is for the board to consider is the delta between whatever they've been paid and what they would have been paid, and the payment that's being made today can't exceed that difference under the special acts.
For example, they have to tell us if they got PPP.
Right. So the one
exactly
one in front of me says that they received a PPP loan, and part of it is that one item that they signed is any payments from the district to the contractor through the end of the fiscal year will not exceed the amount that the contractor was eligible to receive through the contract, less the amount set forth in paragraph 3. Okay. So, I mean, basically, they're saying they're not double dipping.
Right. But they may get 100% based on the other. In other words, we're giving them 45 and 78%, but with the PPP or whatever else they get, they may end up getting 100%.
Right, if they kept their staff on
Yep.
and paid everyone through, they may as well.
Yep. All right, and sorry to ask so many questions. My final question is, what are the and I think you talked about it last time, Glenn, but just kind of talk about the overall benefits of making these payments to these three vendors, VHS, Van Pool, and First Student, at these levels.
I mean, the intent of the legislation was to have these companies available to you on the resumption of service. And, in some cases, I mean, that's really the intent, is to make sure that they basically stay in business.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an obligation on the part of the town. It is available to the town. But, we count on these people for services.
Yep.
So,
And what actually,
would not be advantageous to us should they go under.
and then I guess there's one other question, and that is the town accountant has to sign off. Has the town accountant signed off on this?
Well, when they go through a vendor warrant, she will. She and I have been in contact, and I'm submitting all this paperwork to her as well. She and I have been in contact, and she's aware of. In fact, we were on the phone 5 minutes ago, 5 minutes before this, so she knows you're getting all this information, and she's fine with it.
Her only concern, thank you, Glenn. Her only concern was that the still to be negotiated one needs to take place in a timely fashion, because the last day for FY20 purchase orders or payments would be a week from Thursday, July 9th.
Yeah.
Thank you for working with her, Glenn.
Yeah, which after you deal with this motion, I'd like to ask your opinion about something involving that one.
Okay. Thank you for your questions and the answers. Are there any other questions or concerns?
Well, I
Yes.
think having made the motion, I should probably revise it, unless someone else wants to offer the friendly amendment that I'm happy to take, which was Kevin's language about making the approval conditioned upon, with respect to First Student, the execution of the amendment and the affidavit.
Mhm.
I don't know if there was any additional language, Kevin. I did not write it down as you were talking.
No, I would just suggest if you haven't already seen the affidavits for the other two companies, you might add that in there as well. I know Glenn has, and he's satisfied with it, but you could also I think you should also look at those and condition the payment based on your approval of those as well.
Right. Yeah, I would feel better about that as well. So might I offer that as a friendly amendment then?
Yes, I'll accept that as a friendly amendment.
The second accepts it.
Any further comments or questions? All those in favor? This is a roll call vote. Ms. Conlon,
Yes.
Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus.
Yes.
Collins, yes. And Dr. Pavlicek, I believe you said you had something else to consider.
Well, in referring to the one that is not settled with YCN Transportation, we have made an offer to them. They are saying they have actually asked for 63% payment, which we find to be a little high. And it's a fair amount of money we're dealing with them. And we made an offer 30% similar to First Student, which they didn't accept. In talking with Amy a few minutes ago, the question arose, going back to this notion that really it should be settled by next week. I have told them that I have authorization only to pay 30% from the school committee, which is the case. Authorization to pay that much. The question arises, would it be advantageous for me to say the select board concurs with that and just take it back to them and said, this is what you're going to get or not? So as as a negotiating position, does that make sense for the select board to weigh in on? And I have no real opinion on it. I'll leave it to you whether it's something you want to jump in on or not.
Mhm,
But, I mean, this is where we are with these negotiations.
mhm. Mr. Doyle?
Glenn, two quick questions. Can you enumerate in terms of dollars what we're talking about here,
Sure.
please? For a bit of clarification, that would be helpful, at least to me. And is this then an end of fiscal year payment?
Yes, it's an end of fiscal year payment. The amount that they've requested amounts to $147,000. They are our largest vendor in terms of special ed. What we have offered them is an amount of roughly $68,000. So the difference is not insignificant.
No.
Thank you.
So have you received a sworn statement about what they have received?
No,
I, for
so
one,
they've given a memo saying that this is how we came up with our 63%, which is a memo.
which is a memo, right? Yes. Thoughts from the board? Mr. Zulus?
One way we could go is to say that that's the most that they're going to get from us. So Glenn would have it in his pocket to say, look,
Yeah.
at most you're going to get is 30% from the board. They may go down, but they're not going above that. So we could do that if that would be helpful from a negotiating point of view. You may get 30, but you might get 0.
Yeah, I'm not inclined myself to go above 30%. We didn't do it for first student. And it sounds as if this is a commensurate operation, somewhat different, probably because of the size of the vehicles that they run and some other things. But unless there was a compelling case to offer more.
The size of the contract, by the way, is commensurate. They're both about somewhat over $700,000 a year.
Okay.
And YCN.
Okay. I know that you cooperated with some other communities or consulted with some other communities that are also first student communities. Have you done that also with YCN or?
Because you don't have contracts with special ed vendors, the contracts vary pretty widely. I've worked with Desi on this to see who uses which vendors for special ed services, but it tends to be all over the place. And possibly because, you know, in different parts of the Commonwealth, the overhead costs are different. You know, when you have, as I said before, if you're in Western Mass where your routes are a lot longer for a regional school, a higher portion of your bill is gas and hours for the driver and so forth, whereas a more compact urban setting, it's less. So the percentages tend to be different.
Right. You did mention that last time.
Not commensurate.
Thank you. Well, I still stand by my my previous statement about the 30%.
Madam Chair, I'll support Mr. Zulus's approach.
Mr. Doyle?
I agree.
Yes. Okay.
So I will move that we authorize, I guess we're authorizing, who are we authorizing? You, Glenn, in your position, or are we authorizing the school administrator? Who are we authorizing to do this?
Well, you might do it similar to your previous motion. Are you authorizing the payment to YCN in a certain amount? I could give you the number.
Of no more. Yeah, so the motion would be authorizing a payment of no more than,
68.
but which may and which may be decreased.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so
Subject to receipt of affidavits and so forth that you have.
right. So I'll move that we authorize a payment to YCN of no more than
$68,000.
$68,000, which amount may be decreased subject to the receipt of documentation from YCN and additional facts.
I'll second Mike's motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Conlon,
Yes.
Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins, yes. Motion passes. Excellent. Well, that's wonderful. I really appreciate everybody's time today and thoroughness. And if there is nothing else or any questions, we can adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
And all those in favor, Ms. Conlon,
Yes.
Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins, yes. Great. Thank you. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Glenn
Yes, Mike, Hillary,
and
Glenn,
Kevin.
Kevin. Take care, everyone.